اللهم صل على محمد.
Yeah, please, Bismillah.
So I feel like in the first class we were talking about like the whole mindsets and the aspects of the Muslim civilization, and last class we were talking a lot about the modern civilization and its aspects, its values, worldviews. Um, is it possible to be part of multiple civilizations, or is everyone only in one or the other, and we just need to figure out which one we are?
As far as so, when it comes to speaking about civilization, it's been different in different times. Usually, what happens is that you have a dominant civilization in each era. You can have multiple civilizations active at one single point. The condition for a civilization to exist is that it should occupy a big geographical area. It shouldn't be something very limited and small. So that's why I mentioned that at the time of the Holy Prophet, what he left when he left this world wasn't a civilization yet. And later, like 100 years after him, what he had started then turned into a civilization. Why? Because during his time, it hadn't geographically spread. And at that time, when Islam was spreading and turning into a civilization, there were other civilizations. The Roman civilization was there. So, at one point, you can have multiple civilizations. If we come to our times, although we have just one dominant civilization, and that is modernity or the modern civilization or the Western civilization. Again, the name is not relevant, but that doesn't mean that because we live in a world where the dominant civilization is the Western civilization, therefore, uh, like we are forced to live by that civilization. No, there can be people who live in a civilization but don't subscribe to many of the things that that civilization stands for. And that's kind of the situation that we as Muslims face, that we live in the modern world, especially all of you. You live at the heart of the modernity. I'll speak about it. Like when I say modern civilization, where geographically, how do you define it? But you people who are living in Canada, you people are right at the center of the modern civilization, one of the centers. But that doesn't mean that civilization is a force that's going to like take away your free will and is going to like put you in a situation where now you have to be with them and there's no other option. No. In fact, the final discussion that we'll have in our last session would be this, that living in such a civilization as Muslims, how do we act in a manner that we can even revive the Islamic civilization slowly and gradually? That, inshallah, will be our duty, of course, in the long term. And we'll also speak about practical aspects of how do we deal with the modern mood and how do we live as Muslims in this setting. Yeah. Okay. Now I can see the video. Yeah. Okay, Alhamdulillah. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرج. uh, Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. uh, I'm hoping that all of you are keeping well. And this week, the setting has slightly changed. You can see a different background, I'm sure. And I'm not wearing amama and my abba and kaba. The reason is that with your du'as, I'm in the holy city of Mashhad. Inshallah, I'll definitely pray for all of you. Inshallah, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tonight is also, at least here, it's close to Maghrib time. It's the night of Shahadat of our 11th Imam also. So inshallah, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives us the tawfiq to increase our knowledge of the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, and inshallah, slowly and gradually act upon them. So let's recite one another salawat. Allahumma salli ala. Okay, so you can see my screen, I'm sure. So we're all ready to start. Okay, so this is the third session, and we have two things to discuss today. Of course, again, as I've been mentioning before, again and again, that uh, I'm going to give you a lot of broad overview of a lot of different topics. We won't have enough time to go in the depth of each of these. So we're covering a lot of breadth. We are like spanning a lot of different areas, and inshallah that will lead us to a lot of other courses, questions that inshallah we can and we should pursue. So our aim is to go as broad as possible and see different themes that are relevant to us. So in today's session, I want to finish the part that I started last time. So we started speaking about modernity as a civilization, and I spoke about the three inner layers: worldview, values, and the knowledge they've produced. And today, inshallah, we'll speak about social systems and products of modernity and how they affect us. And then our next discussion would be, now that we live in this setting of the modern world, now the question is, as Muslims, how do we react to this situation? And what's interesting is, although it's not interesting in the sense it's new, it's something we should be aware of, is that Muslims since last 150 years have responded to modernity in many different ways across the Muslim world, in many other various different locations. So it's not that you are the first ones to deal with the challenges of modernity. No, the whole world has dealt with. And not only Muslims, even Christians, the religious Christians, have to, like, they had to respond to this challenge of modernity, because modernity as a force is so dominant, it affects so many areas of our life and our thought, that everyone had to respond in some way. So Christians responded, other religions responded. This is about intellectual responses. Politically, on a more overt scale, everybody had to respond in some way. So modernity is not something that's like no one has responded to it. Okay, but what we want to look at is that what are these responses and how do they look like? Again, what I'm going to discuss today, if time allows, is going to be responses at a social scale. Okay. Uh, our last session, inshallah, from all these very at times complex discussions, social discussions, what's happening in the society at a civilizational scale where millions of people are affected, we're going to narrow down and come down to our own personal lives or family lives, and we're going to look at how can we as individuals, as small groups, as small communities, deal with the challenges of modernity as civilization. And there's a lot we can do there. So inshallah, last session is going to be most important in terms of the practical things that we're going to discuss. And inshallah, I'm going to make a lot of suggestions, which feel free to disagree with those suggestions. Some of them would be something, would be like kind of new suggestions that I'm going to be making. Okay, so let's get started. A quick recap so we remember, because as they say that life in today's times is very fast. With each passing day you forget what you did yesterday. So let alone 1 week passes, then it's like you feel like it's been months we have looked at this. So we started by saying that Islam is a complete civilization. It has everything you need to build a civilization. It has worldview, it has values, it knows how to develop sciences with sciences. It has social systems. So Islam has an economic system, educational system, political system, and Islam in the past has produced a lot of attractions that attracted a lot of people. So this was the first thing that we discussed. Then we said that Islam was the dominant civilization up until 15th century. Okay, and this is how it looked like. I've shown this slide, so I'm moving on. But at this same time, end of 15th century, something happens, and that is that a new civilization starts taking shape in Western Europe. Okay, so this is a profound change. So you can imagine that Muslim civilization is declining 15th century, and the Western civilization, modern civilization, is coming up. And again, as I mentioned, I didn't mention that social changes are small. At a civilizational scale, 100 years is nothing. 50 years is a very small time. I mean, for us human beings, it's a whole lifetime, right? Like our lifetime is like 50, 60, 70 years. At a civilizational scale, changes happen at a gradual pace. So the modern world took good 300 years to rise to prominence, and Muslim world took good 200, 300 years to decline in a very, not a very healthy way. So Muslims underwent a big decline in terms of their civilization. So basically, and there is, and it's connected. I don't have time to go into the history, that one of the reasons that Muslim decline increased in its speed was the Western civilization. So this rise in civilization decided to crush the already declining civilization. But that's history that we can talk about some later time. Okay, then we started looking at this idea that if you want to understand modernity, we need to look at it as a civilization. Modernity has all these aspects. It has a worldview, it has values, it has knowledge, and these three things we spoke about in our last session. And inshallah, today I want to speak about social systems of modernity and their attractions, symbols, products that they have produced. So let's get started. Let me start with a question, although I don't know how much. Okay, these circles that you can see on the screen, so the first three layers are called the soft layers: worldview, values, knowledge. They are hidden, you can't see them so clearly, but social systems and products are something that you can tangibly interact with. So that's why these are slightly different, but they are linked with each other. So okay, so let's start with social systems. So if someone were to ask you what is a school, okay, Alhamdulillah, I see children around. Some of them are seated here. All of you have gone through the Western schooling system. So at times when this question is raised that what is a school? Okay, sometimes we give this answer that yeah, school is a place where you go and learn some things. I mean, it's a place of learning, right? You go into school, there are subjects that are being taught. You learn those subjects. You choose a topic of your liking. You get a degree. You can find a good job. But if we look carefully and deeply, school is something very profound. There's a lot that happens in school in addition to that learning part. Yes, learning is part of that system, right? You go and you learn certain things. There's a lot more that's happening in the school. So let me ask you all of you a question and let's see if I can have some interaction. How many of you have heard of uh, SDG 4 Education 2030? SDG 4 Education 2030. Have you heard anything? Like, what does it mean? SDG 4 Education 2030. Okay, don't search on your on phones. Don't look up
Sustainable
online.
development.
Does anyone know? Okay, yeah. I'm sure some of you have heard this. So SDG is Sustainable Development Goals. Can someone elaborate? What are they? Who said Sustainable Development Goals? So they have to answer now.
I did, but I don't know the details of it.
Briefly, what do you know about it? Where did you hear about it?
So it's one of the sustainable development goals pushed by I think the WEF or the UN, and on the outside it looks really good and noble, but it allows countries to push laws that are against the people.
So if you go, if after the class, if you go online and just search for this SDG, so these are a set of goals across 17 different areas. One of them being education, which are kind of proposed by United Nations. And one of the important documents in that is the goals that have set for education, global educational goals for the year 2030. We're 7 years from that. So basically, the modern educational system is not something that has come into existence randomly. And it's not something that, oh, it just came up and we just go and learn certain things. There are forces that are driving these systems. Okay. So, school, if you want to use the technical terminology, is actually a social system which has so many things embedded in it. So you can see on your screen, right? So I've tried to type it slightly bigger. So modern educational system, firstly we need to know that it's a social system. It's something that you interact with. Okay, it's where your children go and they do certain things, they spend a part of their life, but there's a lot more that goes on there. There's a worldview that has designed these systems. There's a set of values that exist in that system. There are goals. So this SDG as sustainable development goals, right? So this educational system has some goals in there, and as the brother mentioned that on the outer side SDG looks very nice, it's very nicely written, very nicely phrased, but there are things in it that are very alarming for us as Muslims. For example, one of the things that they have in 2030 is that gender equality has to be fully implemented in schools. Okay, now what that means, you know better than me. Gender equality, the way it's imagined in the Western civilization. So basically, it's something that these are the goals that are there. There's a lot more. So There's subjects taught, there are principles, there's school culture, there's teacher student relationship, there are rules and regulations. A school, it comes with a lot of baggage behind it. So the key question is that where did this school system come from? Okay, so it's a social system, and it's built on the previous layer. Sorry, I'm speaking a bit fast because there's a lot I would like to cover today. So again, I want, if we can remember those concentric circles, these are going to help us. So educational system is a social system, but this social system is built on a lot of knowledge, a lot of work that happens in universities, and those are the theories of education. So if you go and search online later, you'll see that one of the topics that they discuss a lot in the university is philosophy of education. Those like how, okay, so let me ask you a question here, that all of you know how these modern secular schools work. Why is it that they teach certain subjects and they don't teach certain subjects? Who decides that? I mean, it's a question, right? For example, why is not religion taught in schools as an important subject? For example, we are Muslims, we want to go to the school and say we want to learn the Quran in the school. It's not going to happen. It's going to be very difficult unless you have an Islamic school that allows you for that. So, who decides what's taught in the school? Okay, there are theories behind this. Okay, that's the knowledge layer. So, again, if you remember, and these theories, they take shape from the worldview and values. So if you see those circles, you'll realize that each of these social systems, they come with a lot of baggage. There's a lot that's going on in the background whereby under the layer, the outer layer, there's these theories that are driving these educational systems. And behind these theories, there are these worldviews and values. So I just wanted to give an example of a social system. Usually in my other sessions, I give example of capitalism as the economic system of the modern world, but the example becomes too complex and many people don't have background in economics, so it becomes hard to understand. But I think school is something that we can easily appreciate, especially all of you can feel this with this rising push for LGBT things in the school. Okay, where is it coming from? Why is it being pushed? Of course, there's a lot of baggage that goes behind that. Anyhow, so social systems are those things that actually run the society. This is somewhere where you interact with these social systems on a day-to-day level. So let me just list some of these social systems, and they impact our lives heavily. So economic system of the modern world is capitalism, very clearly. Of course, capitalism itself has been changing throughout time. So capitalism is not one static thing. There are different theories that drive capitalism. So the capitalism we see today, it has a lot of backing from academia. There's a lot of research that happens in economics that drives these social systems. And the story is long, that how from the free market economy of Adam Smith, things have changed. These economic theories have evolved. And today's world, there are some theories that are behind this. If someone has studied economics, they have a degree in economics, I mean, I'm sure they'll know much more details of what I'm trying to allude to. Okay. Of course, the political system of the modern world is liberal democracy. That's the dominant one. Uh, Modern world has a very elaborate media system. So media is a system. It's a social system. And if I want to see what is that, it's the Hollywood and the corporate media. Okay. And again, each of these you can go into the long story, especially media. You can speak a lot about Hollywood, who are the founders of the Hollywood, what are their ideas, what do they think, what's their worldview, what's their values, how they embed these values in these media products that they're producing. And believe me, these especially the Western media system, they work with huge budgets. I don't know if you have an idea, like for example, Disney, as one of the big media companies, their budget is like close to, probably haven't checked recently, probably something close to $100 billion. Okay, so they're sitting on big money and they're impacting people's lives. It's a very elaborate system. Social media is part of their media system. Facebook is huge, right? It's making a lot of money and it's impacting people's lives. So this is their media system, and the list goes on. And I just spoke very briefly about education. So uh, we as people living in this civilization, we interact with these. We interact with the capitalistic system every day. You go to banks, you deal with cryptocurrency, you take loans, you're paying back mortgage. That's what you're doing. You interact with liberal democracy every single day. These are government institutions, there are members of parliament, there's elections. Media, you interact with it every single day. Okay, so this is a key point, that social system is where you start interacting with these different, and again I just mentioned the four most important social systems. There are other systems. If you really want to enumerate all the social systems that are important in a society, the number is around 10 to 12 of these, which are very relevant, but these are the four most impactful social systems that are out there. Okay, now what do these social systems do? It's very simple. Each of these social systems, they produce certain products for us to use. Okay. What does media produce? It produces movies, games, serials, right? These various series that you have, right? I mean, some of them, I mean, I don't even know the names. Like, there's so many out there now. Like, especially Netflix has made, like, Netflix and all these changes. There's so many of these television series. So, social systems produce products, and the Western social systems, they produce a lot of products. Okay. So, media produces these products. Who uses these products? You and me, people who live in that civilization. It's for them to consume these products. Who watches the movies? People who live there. Who play computer games? Our children are going to play computer games, and everybody's children, everybody, like, I mean, anybody living in Canada, they, if they want to play computer games, they can. It's a product of the modern world. They have produced it. Economic system, the most dominant system in modernity and modern world is their economic system, and it has a long history, and it's something that you interact with it. For example, cryptocurrency was the latest product of the modern economic system, right? Something very crazy. No one understands fully how it works. It goes up like crazy, comes down like crazy. I don't know if you know, like, when Bitcoin was on its like highest price, the market capitalization, means how much money that people had put in it, had reached $3 trillion. That's how much money people had put in just Bitcoin. And when it crashed, $2 trillion of money was wiped out. People lost that much money, right? Because it went up to 60,000, came down to 20,000. People are using these products, right? Cryptocurrency is one of their products. One interesting thing to note is that modernity also has a very elaborate cultural system that produces a lot of cultural products. Let me give you some examples. So, for example, modernity produces these things for us: clothing, jewelry, fashion. Again, we shouldn't think that all these things come into existence randomly. Okay. There are very elite institutes and institutions that drive the dominant fashion. Okay. For example, France is one of those leading players which drives a lot of these fashion related things. There's big companies who do research and they see what fashion is most suited and that will make the most money. A lot of research happens on that, and based on that, they change the fashion of the people. I mean, there are elements that are driving this. Again, I said this last time. I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist that is somehow like linking everything to, like, I don't know, Freemasons, or I don't know, Bilderberg group. No, I'm not saying that it's something like that. I'm saying that it's something you can go and identify. Go and search online the elite fashion research institutes. You will find them, and they're doing their research. They publish their research. It's nothing hidden out there. It's something. It's just that we don't bother to look. We don't look at these things. Again, why? Because we just use their products. Normally, most people, more than 95% of the people living in the modern civilization, they just use the products. Why? Because it's very attractive, very pleasurable. No one thinks that who are designing these products. So computer games, right? uh, uh, if you go and search, you will find enough information about who. At times there are institutions that tell some of these companies, make this computer game. Like, they give them an agenda that, look, I want a computer game with these goals to be there. I mean, but most people, like, I mean, the children don't care who made the computer game, right? They're just going to play it. But if you go and trace back where it's coming from, it's something very visible. It's not something very hidden. And one of the big things in today's modern world is the big tech companies. Okay. And they produce a lot of products that have a lot of impact on people's lives. So technology, internet, social media, gadgets, communications, these are the products around us. I mean, I'm sure that there's no one in today's day and age that can survive without a smartphone, survive without internet, survive without these new technologies, social media. So these are the products of the modern world that are around us. Okay, so you may ask, okay, so what? Uh, Okay, so the answer is nothing. I'm just describing the modern world for you. So basically, the summary so far is that modern world has these five things. They have a worldview. Based on that worldview, they have values. Based on those values, they have developed sciences and academics in a certain way. Based on these theories that they have in science and in other places, they have built their social systems. Their social systems have today acquired a global character because of the communication technologies, and they are producing products at a very fast rate. I mean, if you go and check these technology blocks, you'll see that probably every single day, close to 10 new gadgets, mobile phones are launched. I mean, at least 10 new mobile every single day. So, this technology, these products are thrown at us at a very fast pace, and this is the world in which we live. So, the next question is okay, so what? The answer is that when people are surrounded by the products of the modern world, then people start getting affected. It's natural, right? If you are in the center and you're surrounded by so many products, and these products have come with a lot of baggage, these products are bound to impact all of us. Okay. Let me just say this before I continue, is that you may ask that, oh, modern world, Western civilization, where is it? Okay. I mean, can I point? Okay. So the answer is very simple, that Western Europe, North America are the core of the modern civilization. And the leading face of the modern civilization is United States, right? Means if you want to see modern civilization at its peak, means at its top in what it does, right or wrong, you'll see that in United States. The biggest economy, the biggest military, the strongest media system. I mean, all those things that I mentioned. Okay. Uh, Canada definitely is one of those cores and centers of modern world. Okay, so you should be happy that you sit in that very central place of the modern world. And Western Europe, of course, England, France, Germany. More eastwards you go, because modern world is not a reality that's fixed, right? It has shades. So eastwards you go in the Europe, modern world becomes slightly faded in that. Just class. Sorry, it's my son. Yeah. નથી sir. It's okay. No. તમે જાઓ રમો. Okay, sorry. It's my. Okay. They had some important. Modern world, it has a core. But today, modern world is a global phenomenon. So even in a country like Iran, modern world is present. How? Through these globalized technology, through the media. Yes, the political systems of the modern world, for example, are not there in many of the countries. But the other systems are there. Today, we live in a globalized economy. So the economic system of the modern world is dominant everywhere. Okay, you can't escape it. Okay, and if you try and escape it, you'll be sanctioned for that. Okay, media system of the modern world is present globally. You live in a small village in India, you will find modern world there. I mean, the technology, right? So it's a very unique kind of a situation. So if you want to paint a picture, you'll have to draw a map, and there will be a core where the modern world exists, and you are part of that. And it has different influences in different regions, but modern world affects every single person on this planet, except maybe someone living in the jungles of Amazon. No technology, nothing. Or some of these communities, I'm sure they're also there in Canada, I forgot the name, some of these Christian communities who seclude themselves from the modern world. And by the way, that's one of the responses to the modern world: completely reject it. Okay, there are some of these Christian communities, I forgot the name, maybe some of you will remember that. They completely don't use any products of the modern world, and they live a very different lives, like, so they seclude themselves. So yes, those people living in jungles of Amazon, maybe some very remote village in India, they're not affected by the modern world. Otherwise, everyone is affected by the modern. So uh, now what happens is that civilization is a very powerful force. Okay. So I described, and modernity is a very powerful civilization. I'm trying to scare you all that we are living in a world where we are surrounded by this a very powerful force called the modern world with hundreds of products around us. What happens is that civilizations start affecting people start taking effect. Okay, and the worst that can happen to a person is that if a person living in the civilization, especially a Muslim, his foundation starts shaking, his worldview and values start shaking. That's the worst that can happen. And I'm sure you have seen people around you, or you have heard of people around you, Muslims to start with, but as they went along with the modern world, they took so much influence that they even changed their worldview and they became completely in line their worldview. They lost Islam even, because Islam at the core is worldview, right? Belief in one God. They lost that. They denied God, for example. So I mean, I'm sure you have heard of this, all these ex-Muslims. It's a movement out there trying to organize these people who have left Islam. So that's the worst that can happen to a person when he's affected by the modern world. So I want to give few examples. I'm skipping a bit of theory because my time is less and theory is boring, right? Who wants theory? We want practical examples. So let me skip 2 slides of theory and let me just give you 2 examples. So this is ignore. I'll send the slides later. You can. Okay. So let me give you example of money. How money is perceived in the modern world. So this is what happens. So you see that people at times behave differently with rich people than they behave with poor people. Okay, I mean, I'm sure you would have seen this kind of a behavior around you, right? I mean, if a very rich person comes, people stand up, they do him salam, they respect him, they give him a nice place. But let's say a person comes, again, I don't want to judge anyone, I'm just giving examples. Let's say a person somewhere from a remote village in Pakistan is an immigrant. He was on the difficult journey on the ship. Somehow he made it to your community. He doesn't have very nice clothes to wear. He doesn't know the language. He's poor person. That person walks into the community, probably he wouldn't receive the same amount of respect that a rich and a very well-known person would receive. The question is, how does it happen? Like at times, even amongst Muslims, you see this kind of behavior. The reason is very simple, and that is because we are surrounded by so many systems that every single day tell us that being rich is important. Okay, right? Everywhere you go in the news, who are the top celebrities? These big rich people. You go in the media, in the movies, everywhere you go. So basically, we live in a society where money is glorified as the ultimate value. In movies, everywhere you go, money becomes like the top role models are the richest people: Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and these kind of things. So when you live in a society, your children grow in a society where money is glorified as the ultimate value. Slowly and gradually they're going to accept this. It's going to impact them, and it can go very deep. So first, the behavior changes. So this is the process. When a person is surrounded by the modern world, the first place where the change happens is that we don't change our worldview. First, our actions start changing, our behavior starts changing. Once my behavior changes a lot, my values start changing. And once my values change, I'm now ready to change my worldview. I mean, this is the process. So it's very strange in the sense that usually we may think that I need to first change my worldview so that my actions change. Here it happens exactly the opposite. Modern world doesn't come and tell you that change your worldview. Never. It just surrounds you with its products. Then with those products, it first changes your behavior. Then when the behavior is changed, it changes your values, and when your values are changed, it changes your worldview. So in this example, maybe for a person, after his behavior has changed, a point may come where he may believe that, you know what, it's actually better to treat rich people uh, and not treat poor people. And you come up with like, these poor people, they're dirty people, they don't have manners, they're backwards. Look at these rich people, they're so successful, they're hardworking, they earned it through. See, we attach value labels to these people who are rich and poor. So the values might change, and ultimately, someone might even change his worldview that, look, anyways, we are here to enjoy our life, right? So if I have more money, I enjoy more. So being rich is better, right? So it might even affect a person's worldview. So it goes deep down, but from our behavior. And that's something, the theory part which I skipped, I wanted to show a verse in the Holy Quran that talks about this idea that at times, when somebody starts committing mistakes in his actions, a point comes when now, because his actions have changed, now he's ready to change his worldview and values. But inshallah, I'll share that verse later with you. Another example I want to give, and that's something that, okay, it's very directly related to all of us, so I'll kindly request your attention. It might be a bit controversial, but it's good, right? Like, I'm speaking to you for this my third session, and I haven't spoken anything controversial. So it's not, I mean, controversial is like nice, right? So language. So all of us, all of you who are present here in this gathering, originally you come from an Eastern community, right? You come from the East. So basically, either yourself or your parents or your grandparents, they migrated from the East and they went to the West. Okay, that's something. In the East, all of you as people belonging to East, you have your Eastern languages that you're related to. So Urdu, Farsi, Arabic, Punjabi, Pashto, Gujarati, for those who are like. So, but as soon as you come and start living in Canada, maybe you preserve the language, right? But your next generation, slowly and gradually, the Khoja Shia Isna Shari, like individuals living, they have lost their language. I mean, they're not part of the modern world, right? Because the local people there, they speak Swahili language. They're not even English speaking. But even there, they have lost their language. Gujarati and Urdu has given place for English. So people at home speak English. In their houses, they don't speak Eastern languages. What am I trying to say is, at times we may think that, oh, language has changed from native language to English. It's not a big deal, right? It's a language. When you change a language, it changes a lot of things. The effects go a lot deeper. Okay, so I just want to give you example how change of language might affect us in strange ways. And this is one of the ways in which the modern world affects us. When you make English your sole language that you can communicate and speak and interact, your way you live changes a lot. Okay, so look at some of the effects. So when you change your language, the way you speak with people changes, right? Okay, because you're speaking now in English language, and English is known to be a language that's not emotional. Okay, it doesn't cater for emotions, for respect, these emotional things. Okay, so for example, in Urdu, if you want to refer to elders, you have a different word. So you say aap. When you want to refer to someone who's like same level as you say tum. Okay, if someone is very close to you, or in slang they say tu. Okay, this is no Urdu, no all these nonsense, right? Like if I'm speaking to my father, I wouldn't dare say tum. I would usually say aap, right? It's respect. But you change the language. When your children only know English, they're going to talk to you. They're going to call you he. They're going to call their younger brother as also he. Okay, it's not their fault. They don't mean disrespect. The language doesn't have the capacity to carry certain emotions and certain things. It's the language, is the nature of the language. So English is known to be one of those kind of dry language that doesn't support emotions very well. Okay, you can go and read about it. English is that professional language of the world where everything is supposed to be very like sophisticated and nice, doesn't cater for emotions very well, as opposed to, for example, Urdu. I mean, if you just look at the poetry that's there in Urdu, Persian, and how elaborate and emotional it is, you'll see the difference. Writing poetry in English is not easy, especially you want to make it emotional, unless you want to use ChatGPT, which might do a good job. I mean, ChatGPT can write poetry for you on these topics. So the result is that slowly and gradually, if English becomes the sole language of your child, slowly and gradually he's going to internalize this idea that being emotional or crying is not good. It's a negative value. Because in the English culture, in that English language, crying is seen as a sign of cowardice. You're saying that, oh, why are you crying? Like, are you weak? Are you feeble? I mean, and it's very different from Islamic culture, right? Islamic culture is different. Yes, there are different types of crying. Some are good, some are bad. Our imams used to shed tears in public. I'll just give you one example. In one instance, Imam Sadiq, he enters Masjidul Haram to perform Hajj, and as soon as his eyes fall on the Kaaba, he starts weeping loudly. Okay? I mean, that emotional state, that connection with Allah, his eyes fall on the Kaaba, he starts weeping in public. So one of his companions, he says that, Imam, I mean, there's people here, you're weeping loudly. So Imam turns to him and say that this is the place where you forget everyone else. I mean, Kaaba, you are in the presence of Allah. This is one place. Now you just connect with your Lord. And when you connect with your Lord, you shed tears. Even in public, it's not something to be ashamed of, like crying loudly for the right reasons. But see, the English language doesn't support that. So your children, if they only know English, then slowly and gradually, if you're not careful and if you don't do other things, if you just leave him with the flow, he's going to slowly and gradually think that, why these people cry? And the net result, God forbid, can be something like this, is that your children might start thinking that, this traditional Azadari, what is this? Right? I mean, and it happens, right? I've seen youth who only speak English. They don't connect with any other culture. They sit in the masayib and they're very awkward when they see other people crying, right? Because the communities out there are a mixture, right? There's those traditional people who have connections with the East, they understand Urdu, they cry when they hear Urdu Masayib, they cry, they weep, they wail loudly. Those youth, young people, they're sitting very awkward, and some of them even say that, what's this? I don't get it. Bottom line is, I mean, I wanted to give these examples is that these products that are thrown at us, and language is one of the products. English language is one of the products of the modern world. You can go and check its history. English developed as the colonial language. English developed as a colonial language, and it's dominated the world. And so scared are people of English that even in a place like France, they don't allow English influence to come. I mean, even inside the modern world, the domination of English is so much that the French are scared that English is going to come and is going to take away our culture, our French culture. I don't know if you're following these debates that a few years ago. So, by the way, teaching in English in French universities is banned. You can't teach anything in English in French universities, has to be French. Few years ago, French parliament passed a law saying that in very higher levels like PhD, you can teach some courses in English. Okay, they passed a law. There was a backlash from the French universities. They had to take back this legislation. That's how sensitive people are when it comes to their language, because language is a carrier of your culture, your values. French understand this, but again, I'm not judging anyone. Many of the Muslim communities living in the West or other parts of the world, they're very easily given up their languages, which I feel is a big loss. We can speak about this when we come to the solutions part, and we can agree to disagree. You may not agree, and you may say that no, the change has already happened, we can't do much. But it's something. It's an example that I wanted to give. Okay, let me move on very quickly and try and finish. So, with all this said, and these examples that I gave, again, it might create this feeling that, oh, the modern world is very dominant. It has so many products. It's affecting us in so many different ways. It's going to affect our next generation. They'll go to schools, then interact with media. So, does that mean that we are doomed? We can't do anything? The answer to that is that certainly not. Each of these challenges provide us with unique opportunities to grow. Okay. And it's not something that, okay, let's say you said, okay, let me escape these challenges of the modern world and run away to another location, maybe like, I don't know, another planet. I mean, let's all move to like make a settlement on moon, or maybe run away and go to jungles of Amazon. It doesn't matter. Even if you go there, there'll be different challenges. See, this is the nature of our life, that as long as we are in this material world, there will be challenges around us. There'll be personal challenges, family challenges, social challenges. And we should see each of these challenges as unique opportunities. Why? Because now we are going uphill. We are struggling against the current. And inshallah, if we do the right things, this our struggle against the current, against the dominant trends, it brings out a lot of barakah, both within us, will go spiritually, and also for our societies and communities. So this struggle against the negative elements of modernity is something that can be very fruitful, and it can take a person closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so with this, I have come to the end of my. So, if I divide my discussion into sections, so this is the end of the second section of my discussion, where the idea was to very briefly, in a very broad way, describe the modern world, and I've tried to do that. That modern world comes with all this baggage: worldview, values, knowledge systems. I mean, the academic work, what's written, and all that, social systems and products, and all these are connected like those concentric circles or cotangent circles, as one of the brothers pointed out. And again, I've given you a brief introduction to Islam as a civilization, modern world as a civilization, and now I move on to the third part of my discussion, which a part of it I'll do today, the 10-15 minutes I have, and the remainder of that will be combined with the next session. And inshallah, I want to wrap up in these 4 sessions. Again, your time is precious. You're taking a lot of effort to come to these sessions, and I'm not fully sure how beneficial these sessions for you are, because yeah, it it might, for I personally feel these are very important topics. We should explore them to some extent. I'm not saying you have to become an expert in all of these, but having some clarity of what's going on around the world, what's modernity, what kind of world do we live in, what does it mean for me, how do I interact with it, important questions. They can have a lot of impact on how we live as Muslims in these societies. So please help me with a salawat. No, okay. So I'm just going to introduce this next theme, which you can see on the screen. So now, basically, what happened was that when the modern world started rising and it became a very dominant force, everybody had to respond in some way, right? So, and this is end of 19th century. So, and the key turning point, one of the key turning points is 1857 in India. So in 1857 in India, there is a mutiny, there's a revolt against the British colonial administration, with the aim of regaining the political power. And this political revolt is badly crushed by the British, so badly crushed that if I go into the details, you'll be shocked. Like, it was so brutal that, as because it was led by the ulama, the scholars. This 1857 revolt was led by the scholars, and the leading amongst them were the Shia scholars of India. The ulama, Shia scholars of India, were leading this revolt. When this revolt failed, they made sure that they killed these leaders. So more than 1,000 of the ulama amongst the ulama were killed. How were they killed? They would be tied to the cannons and blown up. Okay, that's the way that the British would kill these. So 1857 revolt fails, and all the hopes that Muslims can regain their political power are shattered. And now the modern world becomes a very dominating force. So now when that happens, the second half of 19th century, you see that now Muslims from across different lands now start responding to this challenge of modernity. It's too powerful. The British Empire is everywhere. It's too dominant. It's too brutal. It's too violent. They have technology. They're militarily strong. They're culturally strong. Their education systems are like this. They have so many things that are enough for them to dominate over us. Now, Muslims wake up. They say, what has just happened? We lost all our power. Our civilization has declined. Where do we stand now? These 50 years, 1850 to 1900, was a period of hopelessness for Muslims, complete loss of hope, right? People said that, I mean, we can never come back. We can never make a comeback as Muslims. We have to submit to the modern civilization. Again, this is a very long story, and historically, it has a lot of interesting details in it. But again, it's not a history class. I just want to point to this. For example, Shahid Mutahari. I mean, all of you have heard his name, right? Shahid Mutahari, famous author, philosopher, written many books. He's written this book. It's called uh, Islamic Movements in Last 100 Years. So this is written in 1970s. So basically, he writes a book describing Islamic movements in Muslim lands in last 100 years. So the same period, with 1850 to 1950, and if I extend it to today, these last 150 years. So in these last 150 years, Muslims have responded very differently to the challenges of the modern world. Again, I don't have time, because this would be a full session itself, to classify these responses amongst the Sunnis, amongst the Shias. I mean, there are different ways of thinking. Some people just gave in to the modernity, saying that if we want to be successful, we have to completely become like them. Some people completely shut themselves down. There's a lot of different responses that happened. I don't have time to go into the details. I just want to like give you this idea that, look, Muslims have responded in very many different ways. Okay, so let me give you some names for you to pursue later. You can see them on the screen, right? So some of the responses. So Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan in India, Aligarh movement, very important. It's a response to the modernity, and a very negative one, in the sense that he came to this conclusion that if we want to be successful as Muslims, we have to become like them. I mean, he came up with it's a again, studying Aligarh movement will itself take a bit of time, but very briefly, he kind of said that if we want to be successful, we want to become British. Okay? If we become like them in everything, then we'll be successful, and that led to a whole movement in India. For example, Ikhwanul Muslimin in Egypt, okay, it's a response to modernity. So Rashid Reza, Muhammad Abdo, these are the leaders of these movements. These are the intellectuals. So see, it's a time where now Muslims are formulating responses. What do we do with this modern world? What's our duty? Should we just give in? Should we become like them? Should we acquire their values? Should we change our worldview? What should we do? We have lost everything. We have no social systems. Our political systems are gone. And this is the time, by the way, where the last Muslim empire, Ottoman Empire, was being dismantled by the British, beginning of the 20th century. So 1914, Ottoman Empire is completely destroyed. Like, officially it's gone. And that's when the modern Turkey is born, right? Ataturk. So that's the time of it. So this period is where British are systematically dismantling the Ottoman Empire. Muslims are seeing that our last political power is also going. Okay. So many responses. So you have Iqbal. Iqbal is one of those people who was an intellectual formulating a response to modernity through his poetry. So a lot of his poetry is not actually poetry. It's an intellectual response to modernity. You go and see in his poetry, he speaks about democracy. He speaks about so many of the other things. He speaks about the Western world, their values. Okay. Uh, in Iran, a lot of these things are happening. People are responding. So you have the constitutional movement, okay, beginning of 20th century, okay, which completely fails, and it has a lot of other things. Then you have the oil movement of Ayatollah Kashani, and again, I won't have time to go into the details. The highlight, and I can say the most robust and the strongest and the most elaborate Muslim response to the modern world comes in the form of the Islamic Revolution of Iran, 1917. Again, I don't have time to go into the details, but it's something that we need to see like this. So all these Islamic movements, from these extremist movements like Wahhabism, for example, Daesh, which we saw. So we have these extremist responses. They are actually responses to modernity. They were put under a lot of pressure. There's other responses. For example, there's a Devban movement in India, again extended to Pakistan, that took a very different stance. They said that if you want to stay safe from the modern world, what we need to do is we need to just like look inside, just seclude ourselves from the society. So they became very inward looking. They stopped participating in the society. No political activities, nothing. They said we just need to do tabligh, we just need to protect our deen. That's also one response. So I'm saying that there's such a variety of responses. Of course, these responses can be classified and you can systematically understand them, but that's not my topic, and that's what I didn't that's what not I intended to do. uh, Another example, for example, so in the Shia, like if you want to see in the Shia circles, for example, one of the responses was Imam Musa Sadr in Lebanon. So when he went, that's exactly what he was doing. He was responding to the challenges of modernity and how France, as the colonial power, had affected Lebanon. And when they left Lebanon in a civil war state. Imam Musa Sadr went there to fix that. So he has a very unique response to the challenges of modernity. So, I mean, I'm just trying to give kind of make this framework that all these movements in the Muslim lands, we need to see in this framework that these are all responses to the challenges of modernity. Anyhow, um, let me skip a few things. And you guys are lucky. I skipped a few things and I reached the end of my discussion. So basically, my time is up as well. If I summarize everything I said today, uh, what I'm trying to say, if I summarize everything from the session, when Islam came as a civilization. Okay, it was supposed to become the dominant civilization. It went up to a certain level. Again, I'm not saying that the civilizations that Muslims had in the past was ideal. No, it was full of mistakes, full of wrong things. But yet, with all those mistakes, it was the dominant civilization for around 600 years. That's 15th century. From 15th century, you have another civilization rising, that's modernity. And today, in 21st century that we live, it still is a dominant force. But in last 150 years, Muslims have responded to this challenges of modernity, and there have been some successful and very robust and very wise responses, especially from amongst the Shias to the challenges of modernity. And the best example would be the Islamic Revolution of Iran, where the idea was to tell the modernity and the West that look, we can run our own society based on our principles. We don't have to adopt your systems. We don't need your liberal democracy to run us. We don't need your capitalism to run us. We don't need your educational system to run us. We don't need your media to run us. You don't dictate to us how we run our society. We are going to run our society based on our worldview, our values, our knowledge, Quran and Hadith, and our social system. We are going to have an Islamic political system where just faqih is leading. We're going to have our own economic system where, for example, we don't want riba. We have our own educational system where we're not going to allow so many of the things that you do. We are going to add Islam to schooling. So, for example, in Iran, Quran is one of the subjects taught in school. Why? Because that's how it's supposed to be for Muslims, right? I mean, we are Muslims, so we want to learn Quran. Why should I add extra time in madrasa for my child? He should learn in the school, right? I mean, I need to balance between my deen and dunya. So this is one example of a robust response, but that came with a lot of cost, because in order to implement any of the Islamic solutions, you need a political system. But to develop a political system comes with a lot of cost. The story is very long. My time is up. I just wanted to draw this very broad picture of what happened through the history. In my next session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two things. One is that very briefly, we're going to have a look at responses of the Muslims living in the West to modernity. Okay, so all these examples I gave, they are in the East, right? So Ikhwan is Egypt. Iran is in the east, India is in the east, Pakistan is in the east. So I just gave you example of the responses to modernity in the Eastern world, right? The Muslim world. Now, in the next session, very briefly, I want to describe that Muslims living in the West, how they have responded so far to the challenges of modernity. I want to give a few examples, and I'll come to the last part that, okay, all this story on one side, what does it mean for me practically as an individual? How do I deal with it as families? How do we deal with these challenges? Very briefly, inshallah, I'll also speak about that. Thank you very much. It was a long session. I appreciate your patience, and inshallah, uh, I hope that these sessions are something that will spark some discussions amongst yourself. Inshallah, is something that serves useful for all of us. I apologize if it was a bit of theory, boring, saying that, oh, these are two big issues. I'm worried of my son. I'm worried about my job, and I don't know, this sheikh sitting somewhere in Mashhad, he's speaking about I don't know what, like society, civilization. I mean, might not sound very relevant, so I apologize for that. Inshallah, keep me in your du'as.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Yeah, so if there are any questions, Bismillah.
Thank you so much for your time and effort these are very beneficial to us. May Allah reward you. The question is that when modernity was coming about, or if you can trace the start of modernity, the first reading said maybe we can say the start of Renaissance, which was the 15th and 16th century. The question is, that's also a time period where Islamic philosophy was also flourishing. So, for example, Mullah Sadra was in the 16th century, etc. So, at that time, were there any responses from Muslim philosophers on when it was coming about? And from that time period, if you get any writings from Muslim philosophers and scholars.
So the answer to that is that 15th, 16th, and 17th century, the modern world wasn't yet seen as a political force or a civilizational force. So Muslims were least concerned of what, like Muslims in those day and age, they would consider Europeans to be very inferior. They wouldn't even pay attention to what they're doing. So in a way, it's, again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just describing what happened. Normally what happens is that dominant civilizations, they don't pay too much attention and give too much importance to something, let's say, that's happening, which they don't see it as important. So it was like this, something was building in the Western Europe that Muslims didn't yet realize that how big it is going to be. So till the beginning of 19th century, Muslims were not concerned. They would look at these like Europeans as like inferior people, pirates. They are known to be pirates. I told you, right? This period of 100 years was like the Europeans were wreaking havoc across the oceans. They're like piracy at the sea. So in some incidents, I mean, I don't know if you read that article that had said initial one, their mention of this these pirates at the sea. There was a ship sailing from Surat, one of the cities in India, for Hajj. It was, the name of the ship was Ganje Savai. You can check, and it was attacked by British pirates, and they looted and they killed and they did very nasty things there. The Aurangzeb, who was the emperor, he got so angry that he banned all British ships from all ports in India. He got so angry that he just turned that like, so they came and they're begging that, look, these pirates did it, we didn't do it. So there was a segregation at that time between pirates and the traders. So all the British traders came begging to Aurangzeb that, Baba, we didn't do it. It was some like criminals who did it, but the ban was there for many years. So I mean, we need to imagine the situation that Muslims were the dominant civilization. They didn't realize or they didn't pay attention. So you would not see, for example, Mullah Sadra even having anything responding to them. Why? Because in the Muslim circles, anything being produced in the West and the Europe wasn't relevant. It's only start of 19th century when the colonial political power starts increasing, their technological power starts increasing, their economics power starts increasing. It's then when Muslims realize that, oh, something big is happening now. And then the responses started, but it was already too late. So see, it can happen, right? A civilization, if it's not alert, it can fail to see a rising dominant civilization, and as a result, might a stage might reach now they're too powerful, and now it will take you a long time to recover. And that's what happened with Muslims. Muslims after 1857 went through a very, very deep decline. So you wouldn't see, but yes, beginning of 19th century, you will see that now Muslims are starting to respond. They're asking questions. What's happening there? How do we understand these new ideas that are there? One other point I'll add is the language barrier also. So Muslims were not educated in European languages at all. They're very happy with their own languages. Arabic, Farsi, Turkish. So it was a very closed time. So they didn't have an intellectual interaction with them. It was only, again, when the colonial power increased, colonial administration needed Muslim people who knew English. People started learning English. Now these new ideas started flowing, and now people are saying that, oh, I mean, like these ideas are very different from our ideas. They started responding, both at the level of worldview, at all these different levels. So you'll see these Muslim responses starting at the beginning of 19th century. Before that, Muslims were doing their own things. They're happy doing their own things, writing their own philosophy and doing own things. But they missed this rising force, and then it was too late to deal with it. Yeah. So maybe that's some answer to that.
Thank you. Sorry, another question, shifting gears to the modern era. Alhamdulillah, we have books from Islamic scholars like Shaykh Mutahiri, and for example, like you mentioned, Allama Iqbal's poetry in responses to modernity. But if we look at the current era, like post Shaykh Mutahiri time, are there any books written by contemporary scholars or academic articles, the likes of which we find in the Western world, like there are publications with citations, etc. And if you want to read something to that level of rigor, the personal struggle that I have is oftentimes the books that I read are just translations of their speeches, and it's a different kind of book versus when an author is specifically writing to the subject matter with references and whatnot.
Yeah. So the answer to that is that, especially in like very recent times, so let's say Shaykh Mutahari onwards, last 30 years, a lot has been written in response to dealing challenges of modernity. But these writings are of several categories, and you need to pursue each. So at a worldview level, so let's say you want to answer the Western modern secular worldview, a lot of books have been written by now I'm just speaking about the Shia setting. I mean, in the Sunni setting you again have a lot of, in the Shia setting from the Hausa, let's say, there's a lot written. So we have this subject we study in Hausa, it's called Kalam-e Jadid, new theology, if you want to translate it as, or contemporary issues in theology. This whole field was created by Muslim scholars, Shia scholars, to answer to the intellectual challenges of modernity. So answering their different ideas which are part of their worldview. So pluralism, secularism, all these, feminism, all these things. So then there's a diverse range of responses. Now these are also of two types. Majority of these responses are in Farsi, and they are looking at the Iranian society. Because see, all these ideas, they don't only affect you who are living in Canada. People living in Iran are affected by these ideologies and worldviews. So the scholars had to respond. So across each of these topics, I can identify books for you. So example, if you want to know pluralism, what's the answer we have, or what do we have to say? Secularism, atheism. So if you want to go at a level of the worldview, that's there. If you want to look at, so we are looking at it from a civilizational scale, right? So even at that scale, a lot has been written and said. Again, this is of two levels. At times it's our scholars speaking to masses. So as I said, speeches, for example, speeches of Ayatollah Khamenei many times as talking about these issues. So that's would have been your reading material. Unfortunately, I didn't find time to gather. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to collect English translations of some of his speeches where he talks about Islamic civilization, Western civilization, and how do we respond. But see, this is at a public level. He's speaking to people, so he's going to reduce the level and speak in easy language. There's a lot of academic work, as you mentioned, academic articles. So, for example, we have met some of those teachers. I mean, I know around like 10 books where, at a very academic level, they have done research responding to various things that are there in modernity. So, again, you can see these responses at different levels. What I just want to say is that it's one of the most dominating and impactful questions that they face, for example, in Iran, because all the challenges they face are from that, right? Because their economy, they have the same challenge. The capitalism doesn't allow Iranian economy to function. Sanctions, so they have to have some response. So responses is a multiple stages. I can, inshallah, I will, if you read Farsi, I will suggest some books, some very nice books. So for example, Shahid Murtaza Awini has a very nice book about the Western civilization. I mean, I don't know if you know him or you've heard about him. So he has a book. There's some other authors here. So inshallah, pray I find time so I can send a list of books, but most of them are in Farsi.
Okay.
Yes.
So during your class today, you mentioned that one of the ways that the worldview of Muslims shifted is because the influence of the products of the modernization. It's something that like exposure to it eventually like shakes you and like can shift you. Is it always the case that worldview can be changed just by like products? I mean, like it seems that worldview should be something that's more core and stronger, that it's not going to get shaken so easily. Or is it just the case that maybe the worldview and values of Muslims is just so weak that it's so easy to shake off with just products and social systems that seem attractive? Like, I'm trying to understand, like, what is it that drives a change in this civilization? Because if we also want to leverage like these ideas to change the modern civilization, we want to know, like, can we change other people's worldview, and is the way to do that by changing the product, or like, I don't know. So basically, I'm trying to find out, like, is it always the case that products can change the worldview, or like is it only because our worldview was weak to begin with?
So as you mentioned, it's slightly complex. It depends. So what you said is right. If somebody's worldview is strong, it's not easy to change. Okay, but the question is that, uh, for example, a child is growing in that society, have the parents made sure that his worldview is strong? So let's say there's a child growing in that society and the parents haven't ensured in the right ways, and we can discuss what are those right ways to instill that right worldview in our children. But let's say there's a child who's growing in that society and he doesn't have the Islamic worldview. It's never sank in him, right? It never became part of his personality. Of course, for such a person, when he's going to be surrounded by the products, he's going to easily give away that outwardly attachment to the worldview, because this person would have some outwardly attachment, right? He'll be calling himself Muslim, but the worldview hasn't come inside him, and that's because the tarbiyah didn't happen in that way. So if I have an example like this, of course, products of the modern world is going to just like, it's just matter of time. Let him just grow old. 1820, he himself is going to just announce that, come on, I never believed in these things, because they were not instilled in him. But let's say you have a child who's growing, their parents did the right thing, and he got that core elements of the Islamic worldview: belief in Allah, belief in the afterlife. Okay, changing that is not easy, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be changed. So I mean, so let me refer to the verse of the Quran that I wanted to mention, but I didn't. So there's a verse in the Quran that says, ثم كان عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء أن كذبوا بآيات الله. So the translation is that the end result of those people who constantly kept doing evil deeds was that a point came that they started denying Allah's signs. So see, someone might have the right worldview, he might be truly Muslim, but if he starts taking negative effect, again, when I mean effect of the modern world, I mean the negative, and by negative I mean haram, to be very clear. Again, let me say this in brackets. I'm not saying that all the products of the modern world are evil, bad. No, I'm saying when I see products of the modern world, if they're going to lead you into haram, like su, the Quran, the word is like asa usu, evil deeds. Haram, the clear example of that is haram. So let's say someone has the right worldview, but he constantly, because of the attractions of the modern world, constantly keeps sinning, it might weaken his worldview. So again, never, our free will is never taken away. Civilization can't force us to do things. They are attractions. They invite us, right? So a civilization has the power to attract us. These products are attractive, aren't they? These movies, games, they're very attractive. If these attractions are going to lead me into haram, eventually, again, it's not easy. It might take years and years of sinning for someone to come at the end and say that, oh, I'm not a Muslim anymore. So I mean, case by case, it's going to be very different. But some impact is always there. Even those people who are strong, constantly being surrounded by material attractions, it leaves some impact on you, right? You have to be alert at least, otherwise you can slip. So that's always there, that more you're surrounded by material attractions, more you have to be alert, otherwise there's always a chance that you might slip. We all have, I mean, it's free will, right? And there is shaitan, there's all these attractions. We can never be sure that we're always safe. So it's never on the one end or the other. Neither are we completely forced to go by what Western civilization tells us. Neither are we completely safe. We say that no, I am strong. My parents trained me very well. I'm done. I'm 18 now. No one can shake my iman. No, it's not like that. Life is very, like, it has ups and downs. There are things around us that can shake us. So inshallah, we need to be careful, all of us.
Thank you, Sheikh Kazim.
Okay, thank you again for your time. I should thank you all for taking so much effort to come inshallah, and listen to me. Inshallah, I'll see you next week. I'll be back in Qom, so I mean, we'll go back to the older setting. Probably I have a better mic, so you can hear me better, inshallah.